We've got Mike in San Jose. Thanks for waiting.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
This is, hi, doing pretty good. Hi, Matt and Tracy.
Hello.
This is Mike. I'm from San Jose. I guess to introduce myself, I'm a agnostic/theist. I was raised in a Christian home, but I had my doubts like everybody else. And recently, I started to really see some truth in Christianity, I guess specifically. And I guess I had some questions for Matt.
When you say you recently saw some truth in Christianity, I was going to say I don't know what that means. I don't fully understand what you mean by that, because I'm okay with the idea that there's plenty of truth in plenty of places. I can point to truthful teachings within the Bible and factual information within the Bible, but that doesn't tell me anything at all about whether or not the supernatural claims are in fact true.
I can see your point, and
okay.
I guess that kind of draws into my question about truth. It's like that, and I said, I'm starting to see Christianity as true. That doesn't mean I see everything about it as true, but I see portions of it as true as of now. And I guess I see everybody else around me kind of sees it as true too. As the majority of the world is Christian, or I wouldn't say majority, but I guess that's the largest religion in the world. And I see a lot of Christians around me, and they all seem to think that it's true, at least the core fundamentals of it. And everybody, as you know, we have different kinds of sects. So my question to you really is, do you believe that anybody can really know the truth about God? And anybody have that knowledge?
I don't think that we have any reason to believe that anyone does have that knowledge. Whether or not it's impossible to ever have such knowledge is an open question. In order for us to be able to say that we confirmed that we had a good understanding of this God, somebody would need to demonstrate, define the God, show that he exists, and show how we're able to confirm the supernatural. Because most of the gods from modern religions, when you drill down to what they're actually advocating, they're all unfalsifiable and untestable.
That's exactly my point. It's unfalsifiable and untestable.
Sure.
We really can't know, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can know.
Well, yeah, but also I would say that because it's untestable and unfalsifiable, it's not just that nobody can know, it's that you cannot have a reasonably, rationally justified belief. And so the people who are believing this, absent an ability to test it, are being irrational. I mean, okay. and those people who freely acknowledge that this is untestable and then go on to say that they believe, I think are being doubly irrational, because they acknowledge there's a big problem here, we can't verify this, and yet they believe anyway. Whereas there are people who think that this is verifiable, that they have hard evidence.
I think we're that's where I really want to ask you is, like, aren't you kind of confusing the notion of believing and knowing? I mean, if you have the justifiable, rational evidence for God, then wouldn't you be knowing that God exists?
Perhaps, but knowledge is a subset of belief. Belief just means that you accept a proposition. Knowledge, philosophically, is defined as justified true belief. I have problems with that definition. But most often, when we talk about knowledge, colloquially, somebody's just expressing a confidence level. So they're,
Sure.
Hey, I believe this, and then somebody else will say, well, I know it. And all they mean is I really, 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 really believe it.
Really believe it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess my question would be, if you can't verify it, why would you believe it? Like, why wouldn't you just wait until it can be verified and then decide then say, oh, okay, now it's confirmed?
Well, I guess like Matt said, there's really no way to know. So believing something is really just putting it above any other explanation, any alternative.
But what I'm saying is, where's the pressure to make a determination about whether or not you accept it as true? Like, why would you do that before you could verify it? Yeah, you can do that, but what I'm asking is, is somebody putting pressure on you to make a decision about whether or not it's true? And if not, then why not just say, I'm not going to make a decision until there's some kind of evidence to base that belief on?
Well, for me personally, I guess you're asking me personally. So for me personally, I recently had an experience that I guess you can call supernatural, and that's what led me to look for answers, not just in Christianity, but in, many different religions. And
so there's an equivocation fallacy that's going on here, because you talked about people acknowledge that you can't know. Well, can't know isn't necessarily talking about knowledge. When somebody says you can't know this, and we talk about that it's untestable, unfalsifiable, in that context of can't know, what you're really saying is there's not enough information to reach a reasonable position on this. It's not just when somebody says, hey, you can't know that, this is unknowable, they're not just making a claim about knowledge, they're also making a claim that rational belief isn't justified as well. And when you say that you had an experience that you could label or you could call supernatural, I could call anything supernatural. What's the justification for saying that the cause is supernatural?
There is really no justification. It's just my, I guess, way of explaining it, just so that most people can understand it easily. It's an experience that I can't really explain rationally or explain in any other terms. Therefore, it led me to look for an answer through that religion or any other kind of place where they give you answers to it.
That is entirely fallacious. You just acknowledge that you had an experience for which you don't have an explanation. And so you went looking to religions for an explanation. Why on earth would you think that religions would have any explanatory power for what you experienced?
Because religions are, I guess, places or congregations where people discuss the supernatural and have different opinions about the supernatural.
Okay, but I can go to a Bigfoot club. That doesn't mean they know anything about Bigfoot or that Bigfoot's real.
Well, I mean, if you went to a Bigfoot club, I think they'd have a substantial amount of their own, what they consider to be evidence for Bigfoot being real. It's a Bigfoot club.
Yeah. And how is that actually, what reason do I have to think that they're correct?
I guess you would have to look at all of the evidence they present to you. I'm not in the Bigfoot club, so I can't really say that. But I can speak for Christianity. There's the Bible to start, and there's a lot of evidence within the Bible.
There's evidence within the Bible? Because as far as I'm concerned, the Bible is a list of claims.
Well, I guess, prophecy could be considered an evidential claim that if something happened. But it depends on really your interpretation. I really don't want to go that far because, like I said earlier, I'm not entirely believing that the Bible is the Word of God, first of all.
I don't know.
Just to make that clear.
I get that you don't entirely believe it. I'm wondering why you believe it at all and what parts you do believe. Because I could see believing perhaps the historical accounts, which have been externally confirmed about, people, places, and things, but you seem to be believing it in part on supernatural claims, and I don't know what the
justification. Specifically, I'm suggesting that I believe that a heaven exists.
Why?
That I believe that it has to do with my experience.
Okay.
So let's just suppose, I don't want to come out here and be all like talking about my personal life. So let's just suppose I had a near-death experience.
Okay.
And I had this experience where I saw heaven, and I came back from this experience, and some people might not say I was dead, some people might say I was dreaming, but this experience I had was very similar to what a lot of other people describe in near-death experiences.
Can we immediately just point out that, let's say I was abducted by aliens, or I had an experience that I felt I was abducted by aliens, and my experience was similar to what other people reported about when they were abducted by aliens. Does that mean any of us have a good reason to believe that we were actually abducted by aliens?
Well, if a substantial number of people came out and said they were abducted by aliens, I think that would be a pretty good reason to believe that there's something going on.
No. Why does the number of people who say something have any impact on whether or not it's true? Don't you realize for ages
just the number of people? That would be a starting point, and then you would have to, of course, look at the evidence they present.
Yes. If tons of people came forward and said something, that might be enough to investigate. Now, how do we investigate it?
You would have to look at the evidence.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Well, evidence by definition is anything that leads you to conclude something to be true.
Evidence
So
of the facts presented in support of a proposition.
I mean, can I ask you, do you believe that UFOs exist? Do you believe that they exist?
No.
You don't believe that unidentified flying objects in the sky exist?
Oh, sure.
I thought you were talking about the context of the alien abductions that he had just brought up.
I was still going within the context of
Right.
aliens. Are there
I'm going to get there. But
Are there? So first of all, are there? I still don't necessarily believe that UFO is justified. Are there unidentified sightings that people presume are in fact flying objects? There's not a demonstration of flying until you actually get to the point where we've showed it's a flying object, or not even a demonstration that it's an object until you get past. Basically, people observe something and they don't have an explanation for it, and they call it a UFO. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, we're not saying it's aliens, but it's definitely a UFO." Well, UFO is unidentified flying object. You haven't demonstrated that it's flying or that it's an object. All you have is something that's unidentified.
But we have demonstrated that it exists.
No, you haven't. You've demonstrated that people saw something. If you haven't demonstrated that what they saw is even real, don't you realize people see things that aren't actually real?
Well, yeah, but how do you demonstrate something is real if you don't rely on your sight? And that's not the most basic sense of data that you can collect.
I'm sorry, but that's not the way we determine that something's real, just because somebody saw it. You have to investigate and actually give evidence in favor of it. People see things, you just acknowledge that people see things, and now you want to say that that's the primary way that we should go about determining whether something's real, is if somebody saw something.
Okay. Well, they also bring forth, evidence with their sightings. They have videotapes, video footage.
Do you believe that people have been abducted by aliens?
Well, I don't really know. I don't know. I haven't seen evidence for that specifically, so I can't really say.
Okay.
I've heard many claims, but I don't know.
So you don't hold it as true at this point?
No.
Okay.
No,
and yet you are okay with the heaven idea.
But I have to admit that there are flying objects in the sky. I'm watching the news recently over the past couple of years. It seems like those sightings have been increasing, and they're actually on Fox News, ABC News, NBC News. They're all over the news. Every 2-3 months, you'll have a UFO sighting somewhere, in the sky.
Yeah, given the pervasiveness of this, why is it that you don't believe the alien abduction stories, but you do believe a heaven?
Because my personal experience. That's my personal. So what led me to all of this is my personal experience. There's no evidence for my personal experience, of course. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what led me to even have my personal experience in the first place was the fact that I believe.
Wow, that's kind of...
I don't really have a way of evaluating this without you getting more specific about your personal experience.
I think about it, and it's like if I was dying, for example, and my brain was starved of oxygen, and I had some weird vision thing, and it matched some things that other people saw, like a bright light and a feeling of peace. All of us have human brains, and perhaps when a brain is dying from oxygen deprivation, this is what happens. Like maybe your body starts to pump out endorphins and dopamine because you're dying, and it's trying to keep you from being in any kind of pain or distress, and so you lose vision. Like for example, I'm a blood donor, and sometimes when I go home, if I'm standing up too long, everything sort of whites out and I can't see and I have to sit down. And I could definitely understand why a body would flood you with good feeling brain chemicals when you're about to die, and how that could be interpreted in your culturally, common context. But at the same time, when I come out of it, I'm not going to trust my brain or my experience or perception when I know that I had an oxygen-deprived brain that was pumping this experience and perception out.
Not only that, but it misunderstands the problems with memory. It's not. So your brain is in this deprived state while you're nearing death, but not dead, or maybe even if you pass over some point and are resuscitated. But the memory is formed after you actually revive.
Right.
And your brain is trying to make sense of a weird experience and creates a narrative for it.
Yeah, the recall might not even be...
So we've tested near-death experiences, we've tested the out-of-body experiences, and they fail. So given
I think that's highly debatable whether you can test that.
Sure,
but,
it's really easy.
You know,
If
Yeah.
for people who are in an operating room, you can put a note up on top of a file
sure.
cabinet
That's
in the
assuming you know. That's assuming you know how to test if heaven exists or what kind of state heaven is,
This
or
isn't
whether
a
people
test.
can do that in heaven.
This isn't Mike. This isn't a test for heaven existing. This is a test of the specific facts of claims of near-death experience. If the specific facts fail, why on earth should we believe the extra facts about a heaven?
Well, you say facts, right? But these aren't facts. They're specific claims about heaven. So you can't test a claim if that claim is just from a witness or witness testimony about heaven. That's the
Yes, we have no.
Kind of reality.
I agree. We have no way of investigating and confirming the existence of heaven.
And you know, I agree with Tracy as well. I'm sorry, Tracy.
That's okay.
With that's a possible alternative explanation to.
Okay, now which one is
my experience.
actually requires more assumptions?
I would believe that Tracy's requires more assumptions because it's pretty well known fact that heaven exists
Tracy
across.
Wait, you say that Tracy's carries more assumptions because it's a pretty well-known fact that heaven exists?
Well, at least in our modern times, most people seem to believe it. So
Okay,
stop.
That doesn't make it a well-known fact. That makes it an agreed-upon opinion. What I'm talking about is which one requires more assumptions. Tracy's includes nothing but the natural world. You're adding a whole nother supernatural realm to it. So which one of them actually includes more assumptions?
Well, judging from the fact that I'm not really a scientist and neither is Tracy, I would say
How is that at all relevant to my question?
Because you have to know exactly how the brain works.
No, you don't have to be.
Well, no, we know. Well, wait a
Stop.
second. We know that the brain dies as it's deprived of oxygen. It starts to die within a few. I mean, this is not something that you have to be a neurologist to understand.
But you
Your
don't
brain
know that
will
the
die.
brain's going to make you see heaven.
But you do understand that when people are deprived of oxygen, and there are specific limits where you'll start to have brain damage, so that when you are brought back, your brain is damaged in certain ways because of that oxygen deprivation. Correct? I mean, that's not even
not all the time.
No, I'm saying that there are certain
Wow.
limits where you go beyond, where the brain doesn't have oxygen for certain amounts
You're
of
also
time,
aware that-
and it starts to damage. Parts of the brain will start to die as you don't have oxygen. This goes for your body as well.
Okay,
I mean, you can't deprive it.
You're also Mike. You're also aware that not everybody sees the same thing. That near-death experiences vary, and they don't even always tie to the same religious imagery, right?
Did you put him on hold?
For a particular imagery is a funny word because a lot of the near-death experiences that I've heard about, they don't really describe imagery at all.
Okay, then you haven't remotely studied this. You just haven't. You do realize that people who are Catholic are more likely to see, you do realize that people who are Catholic are more likely to see the Virgin Mary and saints, and people who are Protestant are less likely to see those, and people who have near-death experiences from other religions are likely to see the imagery associated with their religion, right? Have you at least looked into it that far?
I mean, I know it's possible and that they can assume that's what they saw, and they come back and say, this is what I think I saw, but none of them claim that that is specifically what they saw and that they know it.
You're
it's
wrong. You're just factually freaking wrong. You're just making shit up. Nobody comes back and says this. Yeah, they do. They come back and say all kinds of things like this. You're so desperate to find some way out of the logical arguments. We don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to have any other understanding.
We could hold you underwater to demonstrate the brain dies without oxygen, but it's like, I mean, at some point you just have to...
It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we know anything at all about the brain. We don't have to know anything about science. All we have to do is look at the claims. And here we have a natural world where something unexplained has happened. And we are looking for explanations that fit as many of the facts as possible. Let's build a model that is the best explanation of those facts. Do Tracy or I or any scientist on the planet are we absolutely sure that near-death experiences where people see an afterlife, see a heaven, are false? No. And that's not what anybody's claiming. But you have looked at this based on your own experience and decided, the best explanation is for me to take this natural world and add a whole nother supernatural element to it.
That hasn't been demonstrated yet.
That hasn't been demonstrated. That you agree there's no mechanism by which we can investigate it. It becomes an unfalsifiable proposition. And your justification for this is that other people have made this same mistake in reason. That other people have these beliefs. And every time we try to point out some of this, it's, well, you guys aren't scientists. Okay, it's not relevant. What's relevant is the logical argument and the evidence supporting it. That's it. That's all that's ever relevant. The logical arguments and the evidence supporting it. And when you can expose that the logical argument supporting something is fallacious, then the conclusion is we have no way of telling if the conclusion is true or not from that logical argument. We have no way of telling. And if you then say, well, I'm going to believe it because it just seems true to me, then you're demonstrating that you don't actually care about what's true. You care about what feels good. You're so discomforted by the idea of not knowing that you're willing to go with, hey, this is what most people believe, so I'll just run with it. Sorry, that's not a good reason to believe things.
Yeah, and it's weird to me how sometimes people are very, very convinced by a personal experience that defies everything they have learned up to that point about the world around them. So instead of saying this is so outside the range of reality that there must be something wrong with my perception, they go right to it's so outside the range of reality that it has to be supernatural.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even occur to them that a perception could be deceptive or could be incorrect or could be, you could have a psychotic moment. And that's the other thing that's kind of interesting to me is that even mentally healthy people that are relatively mentally well, can have like a psychotic snap, like that just is temporary. That's a temporal thing.
It doesn't even have to be that kind of a snap.
No, it doesn't. I mean,
we make mistakes in thinking all the time. Magicians exploit that.
Yeah.
I can't count the number of times I've seen magicians and mentalists do a trick, and somebody's like, "Ooh, they've got supernatural powers."
How many times have you driven with a car full of people down a desert road and seen water up ahead on the road, and it's not there? It's always ahead of you.
It's an unidentified wet object. Turns out, not wet, not an object.
It's just it looks like water, though.
It does.
It looks just like water.